See, Jim Jones cult leader glasses on today. Right. Now, on the video yesterday about the action on this channel, if you go to the Beyond Room 313 channel, I made a lovely little video about Minerva. Minerva, the Roman goddess shrine in this beautiful little park in Chester, in England, that I was visited recently. And at this shrine, and showing the video, someone left a comment in the comment thread and makes, it's a fair point. It's just a Roman god, a foreign god the Romans brought, another Roman god. Now, I would answer that it's very different because it's not a Hebrew god. Rome and Indo-European paganism is still part of the same tradition. So, name a god that comes from England. You can't really. You don't know. You're pagan. The last year pagans were destroyed. Pagan traditions were destroyed by the Normans, and all the gods you had before that were Norse gods, and they were imported from the Germanic world. So, Survive the Jive channel makes a very good point, and it's quite plausible that Odin Wotan was probably originally an English king, and a proto-Britannic king that attained godhood, and that was not unusual in paganism. In Ireland, you had Queen Maeve, who was almost certainly existed, but was a queen who attained a sort of supernatural state and is now venerated. So that happened within paganism. Pagans were on the whole thing of every man and a woman as a star before, Crowley. Now, the other thing about this, it's just a foreign god. Well, remember the ancient Britons and the Celtic Britons, and the Hellenics and the rest. And remember, most of northern Italy was Celtic, and as well as Etruscan, and they would have worshipped the same Indo-European gods, so the same archetypes. So there would have been an English version of Athena or Minerva, but there was no English version of Jesus Christ. There was no English version of Jehovah. There was no European version of any of that stuff, of Moses and all those other things. This is what makes it different. And also, the fundamental difference, and the most important one of all, is the difference between polytheism and monotheism in this context. In terms of monotheism, why that was a catastrophe for Europe and the West as a whole was because the idea of one God gives itself to one law, one rule, one way of thinking, our way or the highway, the chosen people, we're the only ones, God's Christian soldiers, and therefore you have a mandate that allows you to murder in the name of your religion because you have the one true religion, you see, and that's because you're worshipping the one true God. Always bad news. Now, the polytheism thing is different because it's more archetypally based, and pagans are less likely to believe that an actual god or a goddess is a real being. They will see them as symbolic, and therefore they're not literally at war with anyone else who sees it a different way. So, this is why a Celtic pagan has no issue with a Hellenic pagan. A Nordic pagan will get on fine with a when we say anything like an Iberian pagan, because ultimately they just have different names for the same archetypes, which are ultimately manifestations of human consciousness expressed and also the cosmos expressed in zoomorphic and anamorphic forms. Excuse me. Now, so it was a valid point in terms of monotheism and polytheism, but not really in terms of it being a foreign god. Another aspect to this is why there's no problem for me and anyone else who wants to do it to venerate Hindu gods in this part of the world, because they're very similar as well. If paganism made a fatal flaw towards the end of paganism, and it might have been a kind of a change in the collective consciousness, was that they began to worship primary deities. So in Ireland, the Crom Cruach became and almost like even though there was veneration of breed and so on, the Crom Krug became center stage as the sort of uber god. The same thing happened in England and the Anglo-Saxon world and the Nordic world. Odin became a very powerful god at the expense of all the others, particularly the female gods. This is important. I'll get back to this later. Jove in the Roman pagan world and Mithra in the Persian pagan world as well, and then Dionysius in the Greek pagan pantheon, although there was very strong Athena veneration towards the end. And this was probably a mistake because it allowed conversions, and remember they were all forced, every last one of them. Very few, well not every last one, but very few of them were voluntary. See, the gods are speaking to me again. They were forced, and it only the consciousness of a one singular god, of a monotheistic idea, was already seeping in. Except the pagans still venerated other gods and goddesses. It just that what the Abrahamics did and the Christians was they made it one god only, and that was the fatal flaw, if there was any. So it was just a matter then of making Jesus Christ a combination of Dionysus, Odin, Mithra, and a few others, and bingo, you have kill off anyone who remembers. Or one of the biggest processes that led to Europe becoming Christian and moving pagan was actually legal methods. They used the law to smash the pagans within the Roman Empire, and then later the expansions of that is through the Vatican and the Church. So to answer your question, foreign gods are absolutely no problem as long as they sit within the Indo-European archetype and they're not monotheistic. And if we as new pagans or Lord pagans or Bohemian pagans or whatever we want to call ourselves going forward, the one thing we must learn is that we must not have a primary deity, particularly a male one. And even the Third Reich, I've done a lot of work on Third Reich mysticism. Carl Jung nailed it perfectly when he said they just replaced Jehovah with Wotan. They replaced Jehovah with Wotan, and so they had a strong masculine god. And this is why I don't like these heathen Nordic pagan revivalists, because all they're doing is replacing Jehovah with Wotan, and that's why they're also churchy. That was the big mistake there. Keep it polytheistic and keep it varied and very archetypally based, and shy away from over-venerating one particular deity, and absolutely stay away from monotheism. See us.